The Varric had long been known across the galaxy for their advanced technology and ruthless approach to expanding their empire. A race of towering beings with shimmering armor and ships that could cut through the stars like a hot knife through butter. They had conquered worlds for centuries. So when they discovered Earth, they saw it as just another primitive world to add to their collection. Humans, with their relatively recent space exploration and unpolished technology, were nothing more than a speck in the grand cosmos. The Varric issued a simple warning to Earth's leaders: stay out of our territory or face extinction. It was a typical move for an ancient species that had no time for underdeveloped civilizations. They assumed the humans would cower in fear, or at worst, take the message to heart and retreat into their corner of the galaxy. But to their shock, humanity did not heed the warning. In fact, they didn't even acknowledge it as a serious threat. The Varric had underestimated one key factor: humans don't bow to threats. History on Earth had shown that no matter the challenge, humans always rose to meet it. From the first, tools created by early man to the landing on the moon, humans had proven their will to overcome every obstacle. And this warning was no different. The leaders of Earth, confident in their ability to defend their newfound space colonies, saw the Varric's threat as little more than a bluff from an old species trying to cling to its fading power. As the human fleet expanded further into space, the Varric grew increasingly agitated. They sent a small fleet to deal with a human colony on the outer rim, expecting an easy victory. The Varric believed their ships would easily overwhelm the human defenses, and they were certain that after this first strike, humanity would understand their place in the galaxy. But what the Varric didn't know was that humans were not like any race they had encountered before. The humans on that colony were not soldiers trained for years in the art of war. They were farmers, engineers, doctors, ordinary people who had been thrown into the fires of war. And yet, in that fire, they became something far greater. They fought with a desperation and cunning that the Varric were not prepared for. The human colony, nestled in the rocky plains of an alien world, had been designed for peaceful expansion, not for battle. But when the first Varric ship dropped from the stars, it was the humans' resourcefulness that turned the tide. They didn't have massive weapons or impenetrable shields, but they had something far more dangerous: the ability to think outside the box. Instead of fighting head-on, they used their environment to their advantage. The human settlers knew the terrain better than the Varric ever could. As the Varric fleet descended upon the planet, they were lured into a trap. The humans had rigged the landscape with hidden explosives, disrupted the enemy's communications, and set up ambushes from every direction. What started as a simple assault quickly turned into a nightmare for the Varric. Their ships, advanced beyond anything the humans had ever seen, were helpless against the unpredictable and chaotic tactics of the human resistance. The Varric tried to adapt, but they were not used to fighting against such unpredictable warfare. Every move they made seemed to lead them into another trap. Their ships were damaged, their morale shattered. What should have been a short and simple battle turned into a brutal, exhausting fight that left the Varric retreating in disarray. This was only the beginning. The humans had shown the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated, and the Varric, who had assumed they would wipe out humanity without breaking a sweat, were now forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew about this strange, stubborn species. This skirmish was only a small part of a much larger story, one in which humanity's unyielding spirit would continue to surprise and challenge the most powerful forces in the galaxy. The first lesson had been learned. Humans don't give up. And now, the Varric would have to face the consequences of underestimating them. Word of the surprising human victory spread like wildfire through the galaxy, sending ripples of uncertainty across every corner of known space. The Varric, enraged by their unexpected defeat, quickly regrouped, vowing to end humanity's defiance once and for all. They had underestimated the humans before, but now, there would be no mistakes. They gathered a massive fleet, larger than anything they had ever assembled before, and set their sights on Earth. Their strategy was clear: eradicate the humans at their home planet, wipe out their defenses, and eliminate this threat before it could grow any stronger. It would be a swift, decisive strike, an example to the rest of the galaxy that no species could challenge the Varick Empire. But what they did not know was that Earth had learned a valuable lesson from their first encounter with the alien race. The humans had not simply brushed off the Varick's warning. They had prepared. In secret, Earth's leaders had put plans into motion long before the Varick's first attack. Knowing that they would one day face a force far greater than themselves, humanity had quietly invested in building a fleet of their own, an armada that combined both the latest cutting-edge technology and the very best of human ingenuity. The new fleet was a work of art, designed not only for offensive power, but for versatility. Some ships were massive war vessels, equipped with devastating weapons and shields capable of withstanding enemy fire. Others were sleek and fast, built for hit-and-run tactics, designed to outmaneuver larger fleets. Human engineers and scientists worked tirelessly, using the scraps of captured alien technology from previous encounters, combining it with their own innovations. Humans didn't just adapt, they improved, and in some ways, they surpassed. When the Varick fleet entered the Sol system, prepared to land their final blow, they were met with a shocking sight. The vastness of the human armada stretched out before them, not only surrounding Earth but also stationed around the Moon, Mars, and various outposts on other planets and moons throughout the system. The Varick were not just facing a small, unprepared race. They were facing an organized, well-equipped force, ready for war. But this was no ordinary fleet. As the Varick ships prepared to launch their assault, they quickly realized they had underestimated humanity once again. Instead of only a ground-based defense, Earth's forces immediately engaged the alien ships in space, where the humans had an advantage. The human fleet had been designed with one crucial element in mind: adaptability. While the Varick ships were powerful and advanced, they had been designed for a different kind of war, one where speed and stealth were secondary to raw firepower. The first shots were fired, and the battle for Earth erupted in the void of space. The Varick, expecting an easy victory, were stunned by the ferocity of the human assault. The humans were relentless, striking from all angles. Smaller human ships darted between the Varick fleet, launching surprise attacks with precision, and then retreating into the blackness of space before the enemy could retaliate. Larger human ships formed an impenetrable line of defense, unleashing powerful energy blasts that cracked the Varick shields. Despite their superior numbers, the Varick found themselves constantly on the defensive, unable to pin down the agile human fleet. Humanity was no longer the weak, naive species the Varick had once thought them to be. The humans fought like hunters, patient and clever, always one step ahead. On the ground, the fight was no less intense. The Varick had expected to simply land their forces on Earth's surface and subdue the humans. But again, they were caught off guard. Humans had turned their cities and landscapes into fortresses, preparing for a defense they hoped they would never need. The Varick quickly found themselves locked in a fierce resistance, human soldiers fighting with everything they had, using their environment to outsmart and outlast the invading force. Every building, every street corner became a battleground. The Varick had underestimated humanity's will to survive and fight for their world. As the battle raged on, the humans were no longer merely defending, they were hunting. They had learned from their first encounter that they could not just survive. They had to strike back. The war for Earth had officially begun, but this was only the start of something much larger. The Varick, their confidence shattered, realized they were in a fight for their very survival against a species they had never truly understood. The humans weren't simply defending their home, they were making a stand that would echo through the galaxy. As the Varick regrouped, they knew one thing for certain: humanity was not the prey, They were the hunters. And in this war, it was the Varric who would need to watch their backs. After their devastating defeat at the hands of humanity, the Varric were left in a state of shock and disbelief. Their superior firepower had failed them, and they realized they had greatly underestimated the resilience of the humans. The humans had not only held their ground, but had turned the tables completely. The Varric, accustomed to conquering without question, had never faced an opponent so unwilling to surrender, so driven by an unyielding hunger for survival. The Varric realized they could no longer rely solely on brute force. To defeat humanity, they would need more than just overwhelming firepower. They would need to rethink their entire strategy. But as they regrouped, humanity was already one step ahead. While the Varric scrambled to adapt, the humans were busy transforming their own forces. The victories on Earth had proved one thing. Humanity had the capability to fight, to think, and to adapt at a speed that even the most advanced species in the galaxy could not match. Now, instead of waiting for the Varric to come to them, humanity took the fight to the stars. Their newly formed fleet, refined and tested after the first battles, became a symbol of human ingenuity and relentless determination. They didn't just defend, they attacked. They didn't just react, they struck first, using tactics that the Varric had never anticipated. Humans had become experts in the art of hit-and-run warfare. Their ships, though not as large or heavily armored as the Varric's, were fast, agile, and highly adaptable. The humans set up secret bases in uncharted sectors, places where the Varric would never think to look. They mined asteroids, hollowing them out and turning them into fortified strongholds, creating a hidden network of bases scattered throughout the galaxy. These places, once lifeless chunks of rock, were now weapons in themselves, ready to spring into action when needed. The humans weaponized every resource they could find, turning the smallest of planets and moons into heavily guarded fortresses, each one designed for a specific purpose in their battle against the Varric. The Varric fleet, confident in their size and strength, ventured deeper into human space, thinking they could crush the human resistance with ease. What they didn't know was that every time they strayed too far from their own borders, they were walking into a trap. Each engagement with the humans became a test of endurance, intelligence, and adaptability. The humans did not just fight to survive, they fought to win. And each victory, no matter how small, further solidified their position as the hunters. Human. Strategy was now simple but effective. Lure the Varric into their territory, wear them down, and strike when they least expected it. Human ships, with their superior mobility, would slip past the Varric's defenses and hit key targets. These surprise attacks weren't just about damage, they were about sending a message. The Varric weren't just fighting a war anymore. They were being hunted. Every Varric ship that ventured too far into human-controlled space found itself ambushed by a network of human forces, each ship a carefully coordinated strike designed to bring down the much larger enemy vessels piece by piece. The humans showed no mercy. They were relentless, tireless, and strategic. Each attack was calculated, leaving the Varric exhausted and demoralized. And it wasn't just the Varric fleet that felt the pressure. The humans had learned the value of psychological warfare as well. Rumors spread across the galaxy about the hunter ships, human vessels that appeared without warning, striking down Varric ships in seconds, only to vanish into the depths of space before the enemy could retaliate. The Varric began to fear the unknown, and that fear quickly became a powerful weapon. The once mighty empire of the Varric was now on the defensive, always looking over their shoulders, knowing that at any moment a human ship could appear from the shadows and tear through their fleet. Every battle, every victory, further cemented humanity's place as the hunter, not the hunted. They were no longer the small, insignificant species they had once been. They had proven that they could stand up to the greatest forces in the galaxy and not only survive, but thrive. As the Varric struggled to maintain control, humanity's war machine continued to grow stronger, more efficient, and more deadly. It was clear now. The Varric had made a grave mistake by underestimating the humans. The hunt had begun in earnest, and the galaxy would soon see just how dangerous humanity could truly be. The Varric's desperation grew with every passing day. Their once dominant fleets, powerful and unchallenged, were now scattered and beaten, outmaneuvered by humanity's relentless strikes. The Varric, who had once ruled the stars with an iron fist, found themselves on the defensive, unable to stem the tide of human ingenuity and willpower. Every attempt to crush humanity ended in failure, and the Varric, growing more frustrated with each defeat, sent their most ruthless generals and commanders to Earth. These were beings feared even among their own kind, strategists and warriors, who had led the Varric to countless victories across the galaxy. They brought with them new weapons, technologies that were far beyond anything the humans had faced before. But even these formidable forces could not break the resolve of the human. Raced at the battles that followed were some of the fiercest yet. The Varric unleashed everything they had, bringing weapons of mass destruction, energy pulses that could level entire cities, and ships capable of traveling through space at unimaginable speeds. They believed that these new tools, combined with the might of their best commanders, would finally bring an end to the humans. But they had underestimated the one thing that made humanity so dangerous: their ability to evolve and adapt. With every new threat, humanity didn't just fight harder, they found a way to overcome it. Then, in the darkest hours of the war, something happened that no one had seen coming. A bold new weapon was unleashed by the humans, one that would change the course of the conflict entirely. Humans, long known for their resourcefulness and creativity, had discovered a way to manipulate the very fabric of space itself. They had unlocked the secrets of quantum energy, a form of power that bent the laws of physics to its will. This technology allowed them to create rifts in space, slip through time, and strike with a precision that no enemy could anticipate. The first test of this new weapon was a spectacle to behold. A Varric fleet, fully equipped with their most advanced defense systems, was suddenly torn apart by an unknown force, as if space itself had been ripped open to swallow their ships whole. The Varric had no idea how to defend against such a weapon, nor did they understand how the humans had managed to harness such power. For the first time in the war, the Varric were the ones caught off guard. The human fleet had found its edge. With this newfound technology, they could strike at the heart of the Varric forces, bypassing their defenses with ease. The Varric, who had once thought of themselves as untouchable, now found themselves vulnerable. It was as though the universe itself had sided with humanity, giving them the tools they needed to break the chains that had bound them for so long. But the weapon was not just a physical force. It was a symbol of humanity's resolve. The Varric had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to evolve in the face of seemingly impossible odds. No matter how many times they were struck down, humanity always found a way to rise again. And this time, they had found a weapon that no one, not even the mighty Varric, could foresee. As the Varric's forces began to fracture under the pressure, their unity started to crumble. Divisions grew among the generals, as some blamed the failed strategies and others questioned the effectiveness of their forces. The once unified Varric Empire, with its vast fleets and seemingly endless resources, was splintering. The humans, in contrast, were united, driven by a singular goal: to protect their homes, their families, and their future. As the battles grew, more intense, the Varric knew that they were facing an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. Humanity had proven that they were not just a fleeting spark in the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with, a force that could evolve and adapt to any threat. The Varric, for the first time in their long history, found themselves in the unenviable position of being the prey, not the predator. The tide had turned. Humanity, armed with their new weapon and an unbreakable spirit, was no longer running from the Varric. They were hunting them, and the galaxy would soon witness the Varric's final, desperate struggle to survive against a species that had proven time and again that they could not be crushed. The final days of the Varric Empire were marked by desperation. Their once mighty fleets, shattered and broken by humanity's relentless assault, could no longer regroup. The Varric, now cornered and stripped of resources, saw only one last option: a full-scale assault on Earth itself. It was a final, all-or-nothing push to crush the cradle of humanity, the planet that had proven to be their greatest threat. They believed that if they could destroy Earth, they would not only break humanity's spirit, but wipe out any hope of resistance. The Varric thought that by targeting Earth's heart, they could finally snuff out the fire that humanity had sparked in the galaxy. But in doing so, they made one final, fatal mistake. They underestimated the strength of the human. Humanity, however, had already prepared for this moment. They had anticipated the Varric's desperation, and more importantly, they understood the true nature of their enemy. Armed with their new quantum technology and battle tactics honed through years of conflict, the humans were ready. The Varric may have thought they could catch humanity off guard, but they could not have been more wrong. Earth was not an unprotected world. It was a fortress. Every inch of the planet, every satellite, every moon had been turned into a stronghold, a bastion of human resolve. And as the Varric fleet descended toward Earth, expecting an easy victory, they were instead ensnared in a trap of their own making. The humans had perfected their use of quantum anomalies, a weapon the Varric had never understood or even dreamed of. With surgical precision, the humans trapped the Varric fleet in a web of these anomalies, causing the very fabric of space to twist and bend. Varric ships, once mighty and invulnerable, found themselves caught in the gravitational maelstrom of the anomalies, unable to escape. It was a chaotic, disorienting storm, and the Varric fleet was torn apart piece by piece. The humans had learned how to manipulate space itself, creating rifts that scattered the Varric ships and made it impossible for them to regroup. For once, the Varric were no longer the hunters. They were prey, trapped in the very web they had thought would be their victory. In the midst of this disarray, humanity launched its final decisive strike. The Varric fleet, broken and confused, had no hope of defending themselves. Ships from all corners of human-controlled space surged forward, overwhelming the disoriented Varric with a coordinated assault. The humans knew that this was the endgame, the moment that would determine the fate of the galaxy. There was no room for mistakes, and humanity, driven by a fierce will to protect their home and their future, struck with unmatched precision. In a matter of hours, the once proud Varric fleet was no more. The Varric, having underestimated humanity at every turn, were finally defeated. With the fall of the Varric Empire, the galaxy was forever changed. Humanity, once seen as a fledgling, insignificant species, had proven themselves to be one of the most formidable forces in the universe. No longer were they the underdogs. Humanity had risen to dominate the stars. The Varric's warning, delivered in arrogance and disdain, had been ignored, and now the consequences were clear. The galaxy would remember the price of underestimating the humans. The human race had not just survived their trials, they had thrived. No longer confined to Earth, humanity spread across the galaxy, building a new era of prosperity and strength. The once feared Varric were no more, and their empire lay in ruins. The message was clear to every species in the galaxy. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with. Those who had once mocked the human race, those who had seen them as weak and primitive, now feared them. Humanity's legacy had been cemented, not just as survivors, but as conquerors of their destiny. The universe had learned a valuable lesson. Never underestimate the power of a species that refuses to die. And as humanity looked toward the stars, there was only one thing left to prove: They would not just be part of the galaxy, they would shape it.